Well, could you clarify what the fourth quarter was in China in terms of sales and what precipitated the decline that you talked about briefly on stage?
Well, we're going to wait for specific numbers until we do the quarterly earnings call. And in any case, we don't usually break it out by region because people draw too much from these quarter-to-quarter fluctuations. I'd say China was certainly a lot weaker than expected. Mostly, I think, because of misperception about the difficulty of charging, which we're correcting. And we are seeing now an uptick in our sales in China. They just weren't all that significant in the fourth quarter. But it was more than made up for by demand in Europe and North America. And I think the China situation is temporary and will get corrected later this year.
And that's
Charging. That was hard to charge.
With Norway's business lately, the oil price has collapsed. The analysts don't expect to see $100 in several years. How is that going to affect your value proposition to customers and sales?
Well, I think it's not so much a question for the Model S or the Model X, which is a fairly expensive car. I think not many people are choosing to buy or not buy the Model S because of gasoline prices. It will have more of an effect on lower cost cars, but the challenge there is just to make sure that the cost of a mass market electric car is low enough such that the gasoline price drop is not still makes it an economically sensible decision for somebody to buy. But there's no question that gasoline prices will have some negative effect on mass market cars. I don't see it having an effect on Model S or X.
Charlie Vogelheim, Motor Trend Audio. You've had some success in certain markets, particularly California Bay Area. Now with the announcement here of the Bolt coming out, electric cars was what you were talking about. Infrastructure is a problem. Where does the cooperation and the growth happen there? I know you're doing things, but what about the rest?
We're happy to cooperate on charging systems for the supercharger network. And there have been some preliminary discussions with other companies. And we've been very open that all that's needed is that they need to make a car that is able to take the high power levels of the supercharger and then share proportionately in the cost of the system according to what their usage of the network is. That's why we're not really seeing the creation of very compelling long-range charging systems apart from our own. They're all like low power, which is not good for long-distance charging. So. But our supercharger network will cover the entire lower 48 states and all of Europe, most of China, most of the world. In the next couple of years, there'll be will be within range of a supercharger. So we don't really need some other network.
How many automakers have taken you up on your offer of using your patents?
We actually we don't require any formal discussions, so they can just go ahead and use them.
Is there a licensing process?
No, you can just use them, which I think is better because then you don't have to get into any kind of discussions or whatever. So we don't know. I think you'll see it in the cars that come out, if they choose to use them. Okay.
Dave Shepherdson, Detroit News. Do you see the new Chevy Bolt as a competitive threat to the Model 3, and what's your overall assessment of the plug-ins and the EVs unveiled here?
Yeah, I don't see it as a competitive threat just because I think all cars will go electric. So if you think of it, if you define the set of competitive cars of cars that are electric, then sure, it's competitive. That's not what we see. It's the competitive set of all cars, not simply cars that are electric. And there are 100 million new cars and trucks made every year. So what does it matter if someone makes a few 100,000 additional electric cars? It's not going to affect us, really. Sure. I'll try to spend more time, I think, because otherwise very few people are going to get their questions answered. Yeah, go ahead.
The Model S was delayed, Model X is now delayed. Can you explain why?
In the case of the X, it took longer than expected to solve some of the technical challenges of the car, and we had to focus our energy on other things. So doing upgrades to the Model S, increasing the Model S production capability, deploying to various other countries. These all ended up being significant distractions. And then the X, we did a bit of a 2 steps forward, 1 step back with the X, because trying to get a car that has some radical new technology in it right is hard. I mean, if we just had a car with normal doors, it would be fine. But it's extremely important that the Falcon Wing doors are not just a gimmick, but that they are a fundamental improvement in the utility of the car, and that they work well and reliably.
Hi, Joanne Muller with Forbes. Have you met with any of the other CEOs of any of the major automakers to talk about this idea of more electric cars?
Well, that's why I'm here.
Conversations? Who have you talked to while you're here?
Well, I talked to the whole audience. I haven't actually had.
I mean, have you had one-on-one conversations?
Not here. I've had one-on-one conversations in other cities. I'm not going to talk about those conversations because then there's going to be articles written that I'm having some big alliance, and there'll be articles written like Elon wasn't, build it up and then knock it down, and it had nothing to do with it. So I'm just going to say less, unfortunately. Sure.
Louis Bennigan, Benzinga.com. You've pushed hard for electric cars. You want the industry to recognize electric cars. If they actually do, and they start to really produce them at a higher and better level, how much faster is that going to allow you to achieve your goals?
Well, I mean, my goal is acceleration of the advent of electric cars, and so I'd be quite pleased to see other manufacturers make lots of electric cars. And then as to whether Tesla, how Tesla does in that, it's a function of how good are the cars that we make. Are our cars better or worse, about the same as other manufacturers? That will determine how many vehicles we sell. Sure.
Yeah, Lee Thomas, Fox 2 right here in Detroit. You're standing in a city that reinvented itself in down times. When you're in down times, what is your philosophy, or what kind of things do you think of to stay positive and going forward when even people, like you said on the stage, some people that you respect say it was not going to work? What kind of things or methods do you use to keep your mind in the right place and your company in the right place going forward?
Well, I think I just feel it's making electric cars and bringing them to ultimately to the mass market is an extremely important thing. So even if people are negative or say we're going to fail, I don't care. We're still going to do it. The beginning of Tesla and even for the first several years, people kept saying how we were going to fail, as though somehow this was new information. I knew that the probability of failure was extremely high. Show in the back there.
Hi, I'm Fabio Blanco with CNN Money. Two-pronged question. Number one is your Gigafactory. Do you foresee that being something that's going to be for the auto industry in general, where you'll sell batteries not just for your own cars, but also for GM, Ford, and anybody else who wants to buy batteries? So you get sort of the backbone of the electric industry. And number two, what do the automakers need to do to actually start building cars? What needs to happen?
Sure. So, and with Gigafactory, we're sizing it to produce a huge amount of batteries. So, I think we could certainly provide battery packs to other car companies, as we've done before, at a limited scale. It is important to know kind of in advance, with some advance notice, if it's a large order of battery packs, you can't just turn on a dime. It takes a couple of years to facilitize for that. But we're more than happy to supply other manufacturers once we get the factory up and running. And sorry, what was the second one? What should they do? I think it's just important for the leaders of the big car companies to initiate serious electric vehicle programs. Not small ones that are like the minimum necessary to comply with regulations, but ones that where it's a really serious 250,000 units a year type of product. And you kind of need to go at that sort of volume in order to get the economies of scale to make the car affordable. So it is a bet, but it's the right bet, I think. I was pleased to see Mary Barra, sounds like they were going to do something significant there with the Bolt, and it's great. That's okay.
Hey, so you're very vocal about the need for, Gabe Nelson with Automotive News. So you've been very vocal about the need for other companies to produce EVs to reduce emissions to do with climate change. If that's the case, then why so critical of hydrogen fuel cells, which are another pathway to zero-emission vehicles? I mean, do you regret having been so critical? Do you stand by those comments?
I don't want to turn this into a debate on hydrogen fuel cells because I just think that they're extremely silly. So the people have published, there's multiple sort of rebuttals of it online. It's just very difficult to make hydrogen and store it and use it in a car. Hydrogen is an energy storage mechanism. It's not a source of energy. So you have to get that hydrogen from somewhere. If you get that hydrogen from water, so you're splitting H2O, the electrolysis is extremely inefficient as an energy process. If you say took a solar panel and used the energy from that solar panel to just charge a battery pack directly, compared to try to split water, take the hydrogen, dump the oxygen, compress the hydrogen to an extremely high pressure or liquefy it, and then put it in a car and run a fuel cell, it is about half the efficiency. It's terrible. So why would you do that? It makes no sense. And then hydrogen has very low density. It's a pernicious molecule, likes to get all over the place. You get metal embrittlement from hydrogen. If you get a hydrogen leak, it's an invisible gas. You can't even tell that it's leaking. But then it's extremely flammable when it does and has an invisible flame. If you're going to pick an energy storage mechanism, hydrogen is an incredibly dumb one to pick. You should just pick methane. That's much, much easier, or propane. Hydrogen fuel cell, the best case hydrogen fuel cell doesn't win against the current case batteries. So then obviously it doesn't make sense. That will become apparent in the next few years. There's no reason for us to have this debate. I've said, my piece on this. It will be super obvious as time goes by. I don't know what we're saying. So.
Cliff Banks of the Banks Report. As Tesla begins to sell significantly more vehicles at a much lower price, it's going to change the retail experience that you guys provide now, especially in areas such as handling the trading, you take the trades from other brands, handling the financing. How are you guys preparing for that new world for you guys?
Yeah, for us, trade-ins are relatively, these trade-ins of Model S's are relatively low because they've only been in production for a little over 2 years. But that it will become more of a thing over time, so we're going to have to develop that infrastructure and figure it out. It's something I think we'll probably have to sort out this year.
Mr. Musk, earlier you said that you foresaw, Paul Handy from AFP, Associated Press, said that you foresaw fracking could open up resources, hydrocarbon resources that would multiply the available resources tenfold. That would seem to think that you see that gasoline prices are going to be low for a generation or more.
They're going to be low for a long time, yeah.
For a long time.
Yeah.
So in your own soft-spoken way, I think you're afraid what it's going to do to the electric car industry. I mean, there's no financial reason to do the change.
There is a financial reason still. I mean, what it does, I wouldn't look at this as though it's a quantum change. It's a continuum. So it's still way cheaper to run an electric car than a gasoline car, even at $40 or $50 a barrel for oil. It's still way cheaper. It's just that the delta is not as big if you're comparing it to $80 to $100 oil. So what the net effect is it reduces the economic forcing function that would normally be there as a result of the scarcity of oil, and so the rate of adoption of electric cars will be slower. That's what it means. It's not now electric people won't buy electric cars. There's less power in the economic forcing function.
Wouldn't it make sense for you to be making
I do think it's important.
Now.
I think it's extremely important that we establish a carbon tax. This is a carbon tax that would apply to all carbon-producing entities, so power plants, to anything that, so to both to electricity generation from hydrocarbons as well as production of gasoline or consumption of gasoline. And I think that will also increase the price of electricity to the degree that the electricity is coming from hydrocarbons, and it will increase the price of gasoline. But I think this is important because right now we're consuming this extremely valuable common good, which is the carbon capacity of the oceans and atmosphere. And we're not paying anything for that consumption. This is like having the garbage pile in your street and nobody's paying for it. And the garbage gets higher and higher. Eventually, terrible things happen. So it's just very important to put a price on, if somebody's dumping chemicals in the atmosphere, they need to pay for it.
Automotive News Europe. You mentioned that your sales are going very well in Europe. Can you tell us which markets are driving that and whether you see another year of growth in 2015 in Europe?
Yeah, actually we're seeing broad growth in all of our markets in Europe. So in the second half of the year particularly we saw quite significant growth in Northern and Western Europe. So our sales in sort of Italy and Spain are very tiny. But as you get sort of north, Benelux, Switzerland, Scandinavian countries, UK, we're starting to see some progress also in France and Germany, and Austria, of course. So it's looking quite good actually on the European front.
Do you expect to increase your sales in 2015 in Europe?
Probably. Sure.
Eric Kessler with the New York Times, second paper. A quick question on China, if we go back real quick. Could you unpack a little bit what the charging issue was? Was it an issue with the Chinese consumers understanding all electric cars and how they charge, or just the Tesla specifically?
Yeah. Actually, Rebecca, could I try you for like a water or something? Oh, there's okay. Yeah, the big misperception that we're dealing with, and I think it's getting corrected, is that people would have difficulty establishing a charge point in their condos. Like, so in their apartment building, would they be able to have a high power wall connector? Would they be able to charge at home? And there was a misperception that it was somehow very difficult to establish a charging in apartment buildings in China. It's actually not.
So mainly apartment dwellers?
Well, in the cities, yes. So so we're fixing that misperception. We also have now completed a large number of superchargers for long distance travel within China. I think that's pretty important. We also just announced the exec rear seat, so we have a much more comfortable rear seat because a lot of customers in China will be driven in the rear seat as opposed to drive the car themselves, or they'll switch. They'll sometimes drive themselves, sometimes be driven. And so for them, they really wanted a more comfortable back seat, and we just announced that. So who hasn't had a chance to? Sure.
Ginger, question on industry. There's been a lot of discussion today about autonomous vehicles. I just want, and as one of the major hurdles to that being safety. Can you discuss safety in relation to autopilot?
Yeah, I think people should be concerned about safety with autonomous vehicles. We don't want 2-ton death bots roaming the street. And I think the standard for safety for autonomous vehicles should be much higher than it is for people. And I think probably to go to full autonomy, I think we'd want to show statistically that it's more like a factor of 10 safer than a person. And I think most people would say, okay, if it's 10 times safer than a person, then it's good. And then we need to prove that. So I think we'll really have sort of mainstream cars capable of full autonomy in 5 years or less. But proving that it's safe and getting the regulatory approval is likely to take 2 to 3 years after that. But it's probably 7 or 8 years there'll be fully autonomous cars that you can just buy.
And where do you see Tesla fitting in that?
I think we'll be first to market with autonomous, with the most advanced autonomous features. Sorry, Vince.
It seems to me that your vision of a mass market electrical vehicle kind of depends very heavily on the Model 3. Can you deliver a Tesla experience at a $35,000?
Yeah, I think Model 3 is going to be a great car, and
What do you give up in that gap between 35,000?
well, it will be a smaller car. Yeah, so for one thing, it'll be smaller, probably 20% smaller than the Model S, Model S is a fairly big car, and obviously it'll be made at a sort of 5 to 10 times higher volume, so that's economy of scale to be had there. Some of the elements that are sort of maybe come for free with the Model S might be options on the Model 3. But for the Model 3, like the biggest thing that I'm kind of struggling with is I really want the Model S to be something different, not just be a smaller Model S. So how do we make a car that's really way different from any other car on the road in a way that's really useful and just doesn't feel like a weird mobile? Yeah.
You talked about profitability in 2020 when the Model 3 is in full production. Is that the time frame that you think investors are anticipating? Oh, I'm sorry, John Lippert at Bloomberg, I'm sorry. Do you think that's what...
I honestly don't know what investors are anticipating. I've certainly said that Tesla's expectation is that we will reinvest our cash flow into developing new technologies, new products, and increasing our production volume for many years to come. So in that context, obviously, one should not expect near-term profitability. Now, that said, I think we will have like non-GAAP profitability before then. I'm just not sure that we'll have GAAP profitability before 2020. But I think any given sort of revenue stream of the company, like Model S or X or the 3, if you were to just separate that from the business and look at the gross margin and say what sort of free cash flow is that product line delivering, and you looked at each one, it would look very compelling. And the only reason it doesn't look maybe financially compelling is that when you combine these things and you're also at the early stage of new products and you're spending a lot on new products, the combined thing may not look good, but it looks good if you parse it out by vehicle. Sure. Not asked.
Marvel from the Washington Post. Mark Gills at Ford has said they has stripped down on Model S to become familiar with the design. Are there any elements to the Bolt or any of the new electric vehicles that you'd like to emulate or you intend to do something similar?
No. Can't think of anything.
We have time for about 2 more questions.
All right, so who hasn't had a chance, I guess, for that?
Tom Krischer, Associated. If GM is successful in coming out with a $30,000 Volt, you can go 200 miles in supercharged. Do you have to reassess the price point of the Model 3?
Well, I think they're saying $30,000 after the $7,500 tax credit, so they're really saying $37,500. When I say $35,000, I'm talking about without any credits. So technically, we actually set a lower number than them. Sure.
Deanne Durbin from the Associated Press. I'm curious, do you intend to stay at Tesla through the 2020, maybe even 2025 timeframe, or?
I'm not sure I'll even be alive in 2025. Well, civilization will still be here. I don't know.
Are you itching to move on to something else? I mean, you're a bright guy. You've got a lot of interest. Do you want to move on, or do you want to see this through that long?
I'm committed to stay at Tesla as long as I'm alive. So if I'm not dead, then I'll be at Tesla. I might not be the CEO of Tesla. Okay. But I think I will certainly be with the company forever. And what I have said is that I'm committed to be the CEO through volume production of the mass market car, because that's what I set out to do. So once I've, many years ago, set out to do that, accomplish that, then I'll reevaluate whether it makes sense for me to be the CEO or whether perhaps somebody else should be the CEO, and I just spend time on kind of product development and engineering, which is what I like to do. I'm not sure most people actually realize that most of my day is actually engineering and design. It's not anything, it's what I spend 80% of my time on. So, sure. I'll do one more. Sure, go ahead.
Mark Rexman with Consumer Reports. You've made a lot of.
I love Consumer Reports.
You've made a lot of statements about how proud you are that you're able to make this kind of vehicle in the United States. But in talking about your volume aspirations, you get to 500,000, then you start talking about several million a year. Obviously, that means more factories. How much production do you see actually happening in the U.S. once you outgrow Fremont, as opposed to offshoring to low-cost markets like China, Eastern Europe, et cetera?
Well, it's more that, if Fremont's sort of capacity is about 500,000 units a year, and it kind of makes sense if you're making a mass market car, particularly to do local production, because if you make, like if we made a low-cost car in California and then ship that to China, it would be kind of crazy. So it would make more sense to establish a factory in China for local production and establish a factory in Europe for local production there, so we don't have to put cars on ships. Because then it's one thing if you're like making iPhones or something and you can put 10,000 of them in a C-van. But if you put like 2 cars or 10,000 iPhones, there's like very big difference in logistics costs. So it makes sense, I think, to have local production for that market as time goes by. So I think you could expect to see us set up in the long term a factory in Europe and a factory in Asia, and probably another factory in the U.S. Closer to the East Coast at some point.
Like Detroit?
It's not out of the question. Maybe Michigan shouldn't stop us from selling cars here. That would be a nice gesture.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Very much. Thank you.